The lunch rush had just begun. Steam rose from the kitchen, plates clattered, voices blended into chaos. Amelia wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes tired but kind. She'd been working double shifts for weeks, always smiling, even when it hurt. At the far table, a man in a suit snapped his fingers. "Hey, you!" he barked. "We've been waiting forever." Amelia hurried over, apologetic but calm. "I'm so sorry, sir. We're just a little short-staffed today." The man rolled his eyes dramatically. "Short-staffed? That's not my problem, sweetheart. Move faster." His friends laughed under their breath. Amelia's smile faltered for just a second. Then she nodded. She brought their food out carefully, each plate balanced with practiced grace. But as she leaned forward to set one down, his drink spilled slightly onto the table. A few drops, nothing more. He slammed his hand down. "Unbelievable! Can't you even serve water without ruining it?" The restaurant fell silent. All eyes turned toward them. Amelia froze for a moment, her heart pounding. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to." He cut her off sharply. "You're not even good enough to clean my floor." The words hit harder than the noise around them. Her breath caught, not from anger, but from pain. The room stayed still. Forks hovered mid-air. Even the background music seemed to fade. Amelia straightened slowly. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. "Would you like me to get the manager, sir?" He smirked. "Go ahead. Maybe he'll finally hire someone competent." She turned toward the counter, holding back tears. Behind her, whispers began. Some mocking, some disgusted. People loved a scene, as long as it wasn't theirs. In the kitchen, her co-worker James stopped mid-motion. "Amelia, what happened?" She shook her head. "It's fine." But her voice cracked, betraying her. James frowned. "It's not fine." He looked toward the dining room. "Is that Carter again?" Amelia nodded slightly. "Just let it go." But James couldn't. Out front, Carter, the man in the suit, leaned back in his chair, proud of himself. He loved control, loved being watched. His friends whispered, laughing like cowards who'd found a leader. When the manager arrived, he forced a smile. "Mr. Carter, is there a problem?" Carter pointed at Amelia like she was dirt. "She can't do her job. Spilled water on my table. Maybe fire her." The manager froze. He knew Carter, a frequent customer, loud, rich, and connected. Amelia stood quietly beside him, eyes down, waiting. She didn't beg. She didn't defend herself. She just breathed. The manager sighed. "Amelia, go take 5 minutes." Carter laughed. "Take 5? You should take forever." Amelia turned away, walking slowly toward the kitchen. As she disappeared behind the doors, Carter smirked again. "Some people just don't belong here." His friend whispered, "You really told her." "Someone had to," Carter said proudly. In the back room, Amelia sat on a crate near the sink. Her hands trembled slightly, but her breathing steadied. She whispered to herself, "Don't cry here. Not in front of them." James leaned against the counter beside her. "He doesn't deserve your silence," he said softly. Amelia smiled faintly. "It's not silence. It's strength." Meanwhile, out front, Carter bragged louder. He loved the sound of his own voice almost as much as his reflection. But a few customers weren't laughing anymore. A woman near the window shook her head in disgust. "People like that," she muttered, "forget who feeds them." Her husband nodded. "He'll regret that one day." The waitress at the next table whispered, "He already should." Back in the kitchen, Amelia stood again. Her shift wasn't over. Her pride wasn't gone. She took a deep breath and tied her apron tighter. She walked back out, calm, composed, eyes clear. Every head turned as she passed. Carter leaned back, smirking again. "You're back? Thought you'd quit." She placed the check on his table gently. "No, sir. I don't quit." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room. He laughed mockingly. "Maybe you should." Amelia met his eyes, unflinching. "Maybe you should try being kind." The table went silent. Even Carter's friends shifted uncomfortably. Amelia turned and walked away, steady as ever. James smiled from behind the counter. The manager exhaled in relief, proud and maybe a little ashamed. For the first time, Carter had no words. He looked around, realizing no one was laughing anymore, only watching, and not with admiration. The hum of the restaurant returned, but the air had changed. Something about Amelia's calm had shifted the room. And though she didn't know it yet, her quiet strength had only just begun to speak. The restaurant had finally gone quiet after the rush, leaving only the soft clinking of dishes and the distant hum of the fridge. Amelia stood by the sink, her hands in warm water, washing one plate at a time while her reflection blurred in the soap bubbles. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired in a way that lived deeper than her bones. The light flickered above her, and in that fragile glow she looked calm, almost peaceful, as if silence itself had become her shield. The kitchen door opened slowly and James stepped in, drying his hands with a towel. He watched her in silence for a moment before asking softly, "You okay?" Amelia smiled faintly, not looking up. "I've been through worse." Her voice was quiet, but steady, like someone who had learned to hide pain without burying it. James leaned on the counter, frowning. "You don't deserve that kind of treatment." She shrugged gently. "People like him don't see us. We're invisible until they need something." When Amelia finally left the restaurant that night, the air outside was damp with rain. The streets shimmered with reflections of yellow streetlights and passing cars. Her steps were slow, her shoulders heavy, but her expression calm, like someone who had already made peace with a cruel world. She walked home through the quiet, replaying his words in her mind. "You're not even good enough to clean my floor." But the more she repeated it, the less it hurt. Some words, she realized, don't deserve to stay with you. The next morning she woke before the alarm. The sky was still gray when she poured herself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the world slowly wake. Her apartment was small and old, but filled with warmth. Books on the table, a few flowers by the sink, a photo of her mother smiling. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "When people speak without kindness, it says more about their heart than about your worth." Amelia smiled softly. She whispered, "I remember, Mom." By 8 o'clock, she was walking into the children's hospital downtown. The place smelled of disinfectant and hope. Nurses moved quickly, doctors smiled politely, and children's laughter echoed through the hallways like music. This was her favorite place in the world, the one that reminded her that goodness still existed. She wasn't there for money. She volunteered. 3 days a week, before her restaurant shifts, she came to read to the kids, to make them forget pain for just a few minutes. A nurse spotted her and grinned. "Amelia, you're early again." She laughed softly. "Couldn't stay away." In the reading room, she sat beside a small boy in a wheelchair and handed him a storybook. "Can you read it like last time?" he asked eagerly. Amelia smiled. "Only if you promise to laugh at the funny parts." The boy nodded. She opened the book and began reading, her voice rising and falling gently, each word carrying warmth. Around her, the world felt lighter, softer, more alive. When she finished, the boy clapped and hugged her arm. "You always make the stories better." Amelia smiled, brushing his hair back. "That's because you believe in them." Outside, the clock struck noon. It was time for her next job. She waved goodbye, and the boy called after her, "See you tomorrow." She smiled as she walked out the door, her heart full. That evening, she returned to the restaurant. The same tables, the same noise, the same man, Carter, sitting at his usual booth. When their eyes met, something flickered between them. Not anger, not fear, just recognition. He didn't expect to see her again. "Still here?" he said, voice dripping with disbelief. "I am," she replied simply. He smirked. "Didn't think they'd keep you after what happened." Amelia set down his menu gently. "They did. Not everyone confuses volume with value." He stared at her, momentarily speechless. Throughout the night, he kept watching her from his corner table. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She moved with grace, talking to customers like they mattered. Every smile she gave felt real, and every word she spoke softened the room. Carter started to notice things he'd never cared about before. The way she comforted an older woman who dropped her drink, how she made a crying child laugh with a silly face. Every act of kindness made his chest tighten a little more. When closing time came, most of the staff had left. Amelia was wiping down the tables when she heard footsteps behind her. "Amelia," Carter said quietly. She turned, surprised to see him still there. "Mr. Carter," she replied evenly. He hesitated, words heavy on his tongue. "I came to apologize." She looked at him, calm but curious. "For which part?" He swallowed. "For thinking that money made me better. For treating you like you were nothing. For saying things I can't take back." She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, long but gentle. Then she said, "Sometimes people say cruel things because they're afraid. It doesn't excuse it, but it explains it." He nodded, guilt in his eyes. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he admitted. Amelia tilted her head. "Nothing's wrong with you. You just forgot to listen." Her tone wasn't bitter. It was soft, almost compassionate. That made it hurt even more. When she left that night, he stood alone in the restaurant, surrounded by the echo of his own arrogance. He looked around and realized that every corner of that place, the same place where he'd shouted, now reminded him of shame. He whispered to himself, "I was wrong." And for the first time, he meant it. The next morning, Carter drove aimlessly through the city until he found himself near the hospital. He didn't know why he stopped, but something told him to. Through the glass doors, he saw Amelia again. She was sitting in a small circle of children, reading, smiling, alive in a way he'd never seen anyone before. The sound of laughter carried faintly through the walls. Carter leaned against his car, watching quietly, unable to look away. As he watched her turn the pages of the storybook, he realized something that shook him to his core. All his life, he'd mistaken power for respect. But watching her, he understood. People didn't love her because she demanded it. They loved her because she gave love first. That was real strength. When she walked outside, Carter approached her carefully. "Amelia?" he said, almost nervous. She turned, surprised. "Mr. Carter." He cleared his throat. "I saw you in there, reading to the kids." She smiled softly. "I do that a few times a week." He nodded slowly. "I didn't know you did that." "You never asked," she said simply. He winced because it was true. He hesitated before speaking again. "I want to help," he said finally. Amelia studied his face, looking for sincerity. "Help. With the hospital, the kids, whatever they need." She smiled faintly. "If you're serious, just show up. The rest will come naturally." Carter nodded, his expression humbled. "Then I'll show up." When she walked away, he stayed standing there, feeling the first quiet peace he'd ever known. For once, his silence didn't feel like weakness. It felt like healing. The next morning, the city woke under a pale gray sky, soft rain tapping gently against glass windows. Carter sat in his car for a long time before starting the engine. his reflection staring back at him through the windshield. He looked older somehow, not in years, but in truth, the kind that weighs on a man who finally sees what he's done. When he drove, it wasn't toward his office or another meeting. It was toward the hospital. He didn't know what he would say or do, only that something inside him told him to be there. When he arrived, Amelia was already in the children's wing, surrounded by little ones who giggled as she tried to make animal sounds during a story. Carter stood near the doorway, silent, watching her. It was strange to see how easily light seemed to follow her. Every word she spoke carried warmth, every smile she gave, purpose. He stayed like that for a while, not wanting to interrupt, but unable to look away. When she finally noticed him, their eyes met, and he felt something he hadn't in years: humility. Later, when the reading session ended, Amelia approached him slowly, unsure why he was there. "You came," she said softly. He nodded. "I told you I would." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of children's laughter filled the silence between them. Carter looked around. "This place, it feels different," he murmured. Amelia smiled faintly. "That's what happens when people care." He hesitated. "How can I help?" he asked, the words feeling heavy and unfamiliar in his mouth. She looked at him for a long time before replying. "Start by listening. The rest will come." From that day on, Carter began showing up every morning. Sometimes he carried boxes, sometimes he swept floors, sometimes he just sat with the children, listening to their stories. At first, the staff watched him with curiosity. The same man who once shouted at waitresses now picking up crayons from the floor. But as the days passed, curiosity turned to respect. There was no camera, no publicity, no applause. Just a man quietly rebuilding what pride had destroyed. Amelia watched him from a distance, unsure what to make of it. She had seen men apologize before, but few ever changed. Yet Carter wasn't pretending. He worked quietly, humbly, never asking for recognition. One afternoon, she approached him as he wiped down a table. "You don't have to keep proving yourself," she said. He smiled softly. "Maybe not. But I think I need to prove to myself that I can be better than I was." Amelia nodded. "Then do it for the right reasons. Not guilt, but gratitude." He looked at her for a long moment. "Gratitude," he repeated quietly. "I think I'm starting to understand that." Weeks passed. The hospital began to thrive again with new donations and community support, many inspired by Carter's quiet efforts. Without telling anyone, he'd been using his resources to fund repairs, buy supplies, and support the families of sick children. But unlike before, he didn't put his name on anything. No plaques, no logos, just results. The only person who knew was Amelia, because she saw him every day, working silently beside her. One evening as they walked out together, the sunset bathed the city in gold. The air smelled of rain and hope. "You've changed," Amelia said softly. Carter smiled faintly. "You make it sound like a bad thing." She shook her head. "No, it's rare. People talk about change all the time, but few are brave enough to live it." He looked at her then, really looked, and said, "You gave me that courage." She smiled, eyes glistening. "No, you found it. I just reminded you it was there." Not long after, the restaurant where it all began announced a charity dinner for the hospital. The owner wanted to give back to the community, and Amelia was asked to help organize it. When Carter heard, he volunteered to attend, not as a guest, but as a worker. "You're serious?" Amelia laughed. "You, serving tables again?" He chuckled. "Let's call it coming full circle." She smiled. "Just don't shout at anyone this time." He grinned. "Promise." The night of the event arrived. The restaurant sparkled with light and conversation. Guests filled the tables, doctors, families, volunteers, even some of the children's parents. Amelia moved through the crowd gracefully, ensuring everything ran smoothly. In the corner, Carter carried trays and poured water, smiling quietly. Some recognized him and whispered in disbelief, but he didn't care. He wasn't there for image anymore. He was there for purpose. As the evening went on, the host called Amelia to the stage to thank her for her work. She froze for a moment, not expecting to speak. But when she looked across the room and saw Carter smiling at her from behind a serving tray, she stepped forward. "I'm not great with speeches," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "But I'll try." The room fell quiet. We live in a world that judges people by their titles, their clothes, their wallets. But what I've learned here is that real worth comes from how we treat one another, especially when no one's watching. She paused, taking a breath. Kindness isn't weakness. It's courage. And sometimes, the ones who seem the strongest are the ones who've simply never been shown grace. The audience was silent. Carter's eyes glistened. Then Amelia's voice softened further. "There was a time someone told me I wasn't even good enough to clean their floor," she said. A few gasps rippled through the crowd. She looked straight at Carter. "But the truth is, it's not the floor that defines your worth. It's what you choose to stand for." The entire room erupted in applause. Carter lowered his head, emotion washing over him like a tide he could no longer fight. When he finally looked up, Amelia was smiling, not with triumph, but with forgiveness. And that smile broke him open in the best way. After the event, when the lights dimmed and the guests left, Carter found Amelia outside under the soft glow of the street lamps. The night was quiet, filled with the hum of the city and the distant sound of laughter from inside. He approached her slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "You knew what you were doing up there," he said with a small smile. She looked at him kindly. "I just spoke the truth." He exhaled. "Thank you for not giving up on me." She shook her head. "You changed because you wanted to. I just reminded you that you could." They stood in silence for a long moment, the world around them fading to nothing. Then Carter said quietly, "You were right that day. Kindness isn't weakness. It's strength I never had." Amelia smiled gently. "Now you do." As he looked at her, the neon lights of the restaurant flickered in his eyes. "So what now?" he asked softly. She thought for a moment, then said, "Now you keep going. You keep being kind, even when no one claps for it." He nodded slowly. "I will." They walked together down the empty street, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. For the first time in his life, Carter didn't feel above the world. He felt part of it. And as they disappeared into the night, the camera lingered on the empty restaurant sign, the faint echo of applause still drifting through the air like a memory of redemption that would never fade.